Welcome back to the channel, guys. Awesome with Content 60. Today, we're going to be diving into a lot of specifics around the prior generation WRX, the VA, that concluded in 2021. And we're going to compare all of the changes that the new VB chassis starting in 2022 made. It's going to be a good one, a lot of details. I hope this is the one-stop video for a lot of you just wondering, hey, what has changed from the previous generation to this generation? And I hope this video answers your questions. If you guys are new to my channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get after it. So it goes without saying that the new VB WRX has been met with a lot of criticism, a lot of love. I think there's a lot of things that are misunderstood, and I hope to shed light on a lot of those differences for you guys. But before I jump into everything that's changed from the VA chassis to the VB chassis, I want to talk a little bit about Subaru because I think it's important to kind of frame this in this conversation. As you look at Subaru as a whole, and as you look at the WRX back in 2002 made 227 horsepower. In 2021, it made 41 horsepower more at 268. There's a lot of reasons people don't like the new model. Number one is looks, and number two is performance. Now, the looks piece, I'm not going to be spending a lot of time talking about, but we are going to be talking about the performance piece because there's a lot under the hood and a lot of changes that I don't think a lot of people know about that's changed, and they're just thinking, Subaru just really hasn't done anything. Well, you're looking at a brand that's been very conservative since the start. You know, if you even look at like the STI to where they ended the STI, it really didn't increase a lot in power. But back to the WRX. So across that, 19 years, they increased the horsepower like, 46, 47 horsepower, something like that. Over 19 years. So they're a brand that if you look at, they're kind of like Nickelback, right? They're going to play the same song and don't expect something different. It's going to be the same song. But something that's very interesting, because I think this segues into the differences, right? If you look in 2006, I believe, the original WRX had a 2.0 liter engine. And in 2006, they changed it to 2.5 liter. But what's very interesting, when they went from the 2.0 liter to the 2.5 liter, and then eventually went back to the 2.0 liter, the horsepower stayed the same when they went from the 2.0 liter to the 2.5 liter. So a lot of you just frustrated in Subaru. I get it, but at the same time, this is a play that they've ran before. So let's jump into the specific differences and hopefully help educate everybody out there the best that we can on what changed from the prior generation to this generation. And guys, if I left something out, there are so many things, there's so many spec sheets, so many different things. If I left something out, please leave a comment below. Now, as it pertains to the looks of this car, I didn't like it when it first came out. I don't think it's the prettiest or sexiest WRX, but I also don't think it's the worst. And when you see it in person, when you make mods to it, the car actually, I think, is going to age well with time. And that's a formula throughout all the generations of WRXs that people were frustrated about. Oh, it changed. Oh, we didn't like this. It takes time for people to get used to change. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the looks, but let's briefly talk about the looks. As it pertains to looks on this car, Subaru, according to Subaru, in their focus groups where they brought in previous WRX owners or, people that may be interested in buying this car, they wanted the car to look more aggressive. And if you look at all of Subaru's lineup, I think what they tried to do with this platform is get it on their standard platform. If you look at the Crosstreks and others, the plastic cladding around the wheel arches is very common. And so I think Subaru, as they listened to their focus group, wanted a more aggressive car. Now, whether you guys think they accomplished that or not, to be determined. I didn't like this car at first. I drove it and it completely changed my perception of the car. And I actually think that's what Subaru has banked on. As you listen to Savage Geese and others, that's one of the things Subaru said. Once people drive it, they will understand it. And that's instantly for me when things changed. I almost didn't drive it. Just because of the looks. Then I saw it in person. I'll give it a shot. Then I drove it and I was like, this is really fun. I like it. One thing I do want to talk about looks, the plastic cladding, and I actually don't believe this, but Subaru claims because there's like honeycomb designs on the black plastic cladding that it actually increases aerodynamics. For me, I just don't know how you're really going to improve that or prove that. I don't buy it, but I actually don't mind that the black plastic cladding is there. So that's all I'm going to talk about in terms of looks. Let's jump into the exact specific changes. All right, let's focus on the performance characteristics of this car, and then we'll jump into some of the other details. So when we're looking at the prior generation, they had the FA20 motor, which made 268 horsepower. We've moved up to a 2.4 liter, so more displacement, more down low grunt, if you will, and it makes 271 horsepower. And that 3 horsepower increase is what let a lot of people down. Now, I think if they would have had the STI, people would have been okay with this, but obviously they got rid of the STI. That fueled more anger. But as I shared kind of early on in the video, Subaru's done this model before, they've done this formula before. So you obviously have more displacement with this engine. Another thing to keep in mind is they're not running as much boost in the stock tune on the VB chassis, the new one, versus the old one. So depending on your climate, depending on where you live, boost can range anywhere from, on the new one, from about 12 to 14, maybe 15 in some circumstances. On the old one, you would see about kind of high 15s, 15.9, all the way up to like 22. So what they were doing with the old one is giving it more revs, giving it more boost with less displacement. I think this car is going to be able to handle modifications a lot better, and I think that's something that Subaru focused on, because if you look at the history of Subaru, there's been a few engines that have blown up over the years and a few issues that they've had. So something to note as well in the new model is it only revs to 6,000 RPM. In the previous generation, it revved to 6,500 RPM. Now, when a lot of people will tune these cars, they'll actually increase the revs or the RPM red line to about 65 to 6250. So when you're overall just looking at the performance horsepower number of the car, yeah, it doesn't seem like a whole lot. 0 to 60, very similar times, if not identical, because you have to shift 3 times in the VB to get to 60, and I believe in the prior WRX, you only had to shift twice, but in the STI, I believe you had to shift 3 times for the manual.
30. 60.
As you look at kind of what they did, I think they made a more robust platform, a less stressed engine, you know, for longer reliability. And they also gave, I think, tuners, because they know everybody tunes these cars. Like, I think 85% of people who buy a WRX buy a manual. I would probably say at least 50 to 60% of those folks as well also modify their car. So I think Subaru said, hey, if people are going to modify it anyways, let's create a platform that can handle more power. And as you guys have seen on a lot of different channels, a lot of different dynos, just by adding ethanol, by adding just a couple, just minor modifications, these cars are well surpassing what the previous generation did. And that's because they're giving us a more robust and stronger engine platform to build off of. Another thing within the WRX, especially for this new model that's changed, and it actually improves throttle responsiveness, it actually improves lag time. They actually have an electronic wastegate and electronic bypass valve. So that allows air, that allows it to open quicker. It just allows the car to be a lot more responsive. There's not as much lag when it pertains to acceleration in the turbo. And, you know, as you've driven some prior WRXs or STIs, I know I've talked about this in another video, sometimes they fell flat on their face, sometimes they punched you in the face. Like, it was just, like Savage Geese says, it was really tuned by interns, and this new generation is tuned much better. So just the fact that they've changed the wastegate, the fact that they've changed the bypass valve that made them electric, they're a lot more precise, and they open and react a lot quicker, which gives a lot faster throttle time. Next, let's talk about the size of the car, weight, and some changes that they made here. So one thing that a lot of people really aren't talking about is they actually raised the ground clearance on the new chassis WRX. The new model has 5.4 inches of ground clearance, and the prior outgoing generation had 4.9. So maybe this falls in line with the black plastic cladding around the wheel arches. Maybe that's to prevent rust, because that's where a lot of cars or older Subarus have rusted over the years. Maybe it's to protect the paint because you're going off-roading. Who knows? They say it increases aerodynamics, makes it look aggressive. That's very subjective, and it just depends on your guys' opinions of what that is. But they raised the ground clearance, and that's a decent amount of ground clearance, especially when you're looking at, you know, close to ½ an inch of ground clearance. Every little bit makes a very big difference. In terms of the overall length of the car, this car is longer than the prior generation. It's about 2.9 inches longer and about 1.2 inches wider. So that can definitely change different performance characteristics of the car in terms of how it handles, in terms of how it drives. But they made the car not only longer by a little bit, by a few inches, but they also made it wider. Something to note, in the rear, they actually decreased the roof line by about 0.3 inches. That's not a lot when you're looking at it, but if you're someone who cares about having adults or tall people in the back seat, that might impact, you know, depending on how tall they are, headroom, but really 0.3 inches isn't a whole lot. So overall for the car, they made it longer, they made it wider, and they decreased the roof line a little bit as well, but it's more towards the back. They didn't really do anything more towards the front. It's more towards how it goes towards the back. Now let's talk about weight, because what's interesting is some models within this generation are lighter and some models are heavier. So let me share with you guys the exact specs in terms of, depending on the model you have, is it heavier, is it lighter than the outgoing generation? So as you look at the base trim level on the new WRX, it is 3 pounds heavier than the prior generation. Nothing to shake a stick at. Really not going to notice it. That's a difference between you eating McDonald's one day and not eating McDonald's. So 3 pounds heavier on the base. As you move to the premium trim, now guys, this is without the sunroof. So my car has the sunroof, Harman Kardon stereo. These are just the base packages, standard features of what come with the car. So the premium trim is 31 pounds lighter than the previous generation. And 31 pounds, that's pretty significant, especially as you look at adding other weight savings mods like wheels, exhaust. You might be pushing, you know, 50, 60, 70 pounds of weight savings, which is fairly decent. As you move up the trim levels, as you move into the limited trim, it is 19 pounds heavier than the previous generation. Now, those do have the sunroof, so that definitely adds a lot of weight potentially to it. And as you move up to the GT trim, which I'm not going to focus a lot on in this video, I know there's a lot of differences with the GT trim in terms of Recaro seats, in terms of, you know, dampers, everything. I'm a manual guy, so I'm not going to dive into all the specifics of the auto, but as you move into the GT trim, it is 11 pounds heavier. So if you guys haven't driven one of the new WRXs, I highly recommend that you guys do. One of the things, and I actually had some comments from those who haven't had a Subaru before, or maybe certain types of performance cars, this car, it is stiff. It rides stiff. Over the bumps, you are going to feel it, especially if you don't have the GT trim, where you can kind of adjust suspension and different things. The car is a lot stiffer. So let me read through just some of the statistics around what they did to make this car stiffer. And that is something that you're going to notice, is they tighten up the car a lot. And there's a lot of changes they've made, from steering to how the chassis is, just to the rigidity of overall of the car. So as you look at the overall chassis rigidity, they increased that by 14%. The suspension mounting point rigidity, they increased by 75%. And if you have a longer suspension stroke, that equals stability. So as we move throughout the chassis and into the dynamics of the car, how it handles, how it performs, rigidity, stability, you know, Subaru even claims from underneath the car, so from a lot of the plastic trays underneath the car, it is to increase stability. So they focused a lot on really just how the car performs, how aerodynamic it is, and I can't test that, I can't prove that, but they stiffened up the car a lot to make it a lot more stable. Another big change is we talk kind of about handling, as we talk about body roll, as you're kind of going through the quarters. The rear stabilizer bar, historically, they've always mounted to the strut bar. But in the new model, they've actually mounted it to the body of the car, which actually helps handling in corners. It actually helps reduce a lot of the body roll that the car could have. So what you get is a car that is a lot more planted, a lot more capable of going around corners. And if you've ever driven, you know, the symmetrical all-wheel drive in the WRX, it already handles really well. So you can tell that Subaru's made a lot of changes in terms of just how the car handles, the rigidity. Something with the front, I believe, fender flares, they're made of aluminum, so they saved weight there. So they were really conscious, I think, is they were trying to make this car better. They weren't trying to make it necessarily a ton heavier, which they didn't. In some trim levels, they lightened it. But the fact that they're adding like aluminum panels up front, they're trying to make this car performance-based. So a lot of you that just think, hey, they just repackaged something and passed along down the line, it's not true. But wait, guys, there's actually even more changes that they made to how this car handles and some of the different characteristics of it that actually improve the driving dynamics of it. So another thing that is really important that's also changes a lot of the driving characteristics of the car is the steering. So this features a dual pinion electric steering. It's supposed to give faster response time. It's supposed to give a more natural feel, and it's really to help just improve the driving characteristics of the car. So that is something that's really changed a lot for the new WRX, is just the steering feel of the car. So, you know, I really can't compare this to a prior generation in terms of just steering feel. But I will say, as I've taken around some corners, I've driven it, it seems very responsive, it seems very natural, and it's something that I think makes a big difference. And when you boil it all into everything that they've changed quite a few things to this car. So now moving to the inside of the car, I'm not going to go through every changes because obviously when you get into cars, there's a lot of different things that they do to change these up. But I'm just going to highlight on a few things. So obviously, as you look at Subaru, over the years, they haven't been known to be very savvy. They haven't been known to be the most technologically advanced when it comes to features inside of the car. They try to just create a raw car that is just fun to drive. It's very mechanical, which I actually really appreciate. But as we look at some of the changes on the interior, there's a few changes that are worth noting. If you guys have the base model, this doesn't apply because they have two screens with a kind of a plastic divider. But as you move to the premium trims on up, you actually have more of the Apple kind of Tesla tablet type style. I must admit, when I saw these in videos, when I first saw it, I didn't like it. But after having it, after using it, I actually really like it. Surprisingly, I found it to be totally fine. It's been responsive. I haven't had any issues with it. A lot of people have had some issues with it. Now, I don't know if they've corrected that for 2023 or not, but I've actually enjoyed it. And what's great about the infotainment, where brands like Volkswagen and others didn't listen to consumers, is you still actually have physical knobs for the volume, for tuning, for defrosting, for your climate control. So it actually is pretty sweet. Another thing that I think also makes it even a more driver-focused car is in the prior generations, you had your boost gauge kind of up in towards the middle, and it was a really kind of just small area screen where you could see your peak boost, see different performance characteristics of the car. They've now moved it over into where the center console is for the driver, where you're looking at your RPM, where you're looking at your speed, your gas mileage, all of that. So they've integrated that into the screen right there. I always thought that was a feature that was really cool that Subaru did, you know, to kind of show the different peak boosts and wherever that's at. But the fact that they've moved it over here, I remember when I was driving STIs, I never looked up into kind of the center console because I was kind of more focused on my RPM, I was more focused on the speed that I was going. So I actually think they made it a lot more driver focused by moving it over into the center area. There's other stuff that they've changed, you know, vents they've changed. You know, you have a couple USB chargers here in the back. Depending on your trim level, there's different seats, different things that you have, different materials. Well, obviously there's other additions they've done like driver eyesight assist technology. You know, for those of you who are interested in an automatic, it's still a CVT. Subaru calls it their sport performance transmission. They're trying to rebrand it. Now, they've promised faster downshifts and upshifts. They've promised a better driving experience. Obviously, in the GT, you get Recaros. It's very interesting, and I'm going to talk about this in another video, but the GT gets a lot of goodies that the other trim levels don't get. You know, you obviously have different drive modes. You have the ability to adjust the suspension and the stiffness of it. So they really saved all of the goodies for the GT trim level. But what I'm hearing and what I've reviewed, and I haven't driven the SPT or CVT transmission, is it's actually pretty well done for a CVT. It's one of the best CVTs out there. I still don't think it's perfect, but at the end of the day, Subaru put all of their eggs in that basket of including the best seats, drive modes, different dampers, you know, into the automatic. So more to come there. But if you are interested in automatic, I would say drive it. It is CVT, but from what I've heard and the reviews that I've seen and the videos that I've seen, it's actually quite impressive. So at the end of this, as we look at all the changes, as we look at everything that has changed from the previous generation to the new generation, it's worth noting, well, what does this cost us? How much more does this cost us from the 2021 WRX to the 2022? Well, the 2021 WRX, the base price was $27,495. As you bump up into the VB chassis for 2022, it was $29,605. So basically a $2,200 increase in price. And as you move into 2023, that bumped up another $1,000 to $30,605. Now, it's all kind of relative when you put it into context. Almost every manufacturer for the last 3 years has been raising their prices anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 every single year. COVID, the market, just everything from inflation just shot prices through the roof on everything. So even though the prices increased $2,000, that's still a lot of money. It genuinely is. And you guys have to weigh, hey, is moving up to a new model worth it? If you haven't come from a WRX, I still think you'll find it's a great deal. But maybe somebody who owned a VA chassis might go, hey, that's for everything you've listed, Austin, maybe all of that isn't worth the extra $2,000 jump up in price. And it's worth noting that the last version of the STI in 2021 retailed for around $37,000 and change, like $37,245, something like that. So when you put that into context, you know, if we would have had an STI, probably would have started, you know, around the $40,000 range, if not more, because if you look at the GD trim, I think, I don't know, it would have been up there. I think it probably would have ended up in the mid 40s, roughly, would probably have been the starting price for it. So that would have saw an even greater increase in price. So you guys have to weigh, is that worth it for you? But that is the pricing from the previous generation to this generation, from the 2022 to the 2023. Now, when you look at pricing overall, what does it compete against? What other all-wheel drive car can you get in a manual that has all-wheel drive, that has, you know, the driving characteristics of the WRX? Go ahead, find one for me that's turbocharged, that puts around the same horsepower, same torque. It's tough. The next step up, or other steps, are, you know, the Golf R, you know, but that's considerably more expensive. You could also look at a Mazda 3 Turbo, but that doesn't have the manual and the turbo model. So Subaru, at the same point in time, they kind of have this sweet spot in the marketplace where they're priced. And I still think for the value of this car compared to like a Honda Civic Si, where those are, you know, starting around 27 to 29, and dealers have them marked up to mid 30s to upper 30s, for the horsepower and functionality you get out of this, it's such a better buy, in my opinion. What I wanted to do with this video is I wanted to share with you guys that as I summarized all the things that Subaru changed, a lot of people are frustrated with Subaru because they didn't change much. Hopefully after you see what I've shared with you guys today, you'll understand that they've changed a lot of things. A manufacturer's not going to increase ride height. A manufacturer's not going to put a brand new, or you know, they've used this in their other platforms, to be fair, but they're going to completely change up the engine. They're going to change up the steering. They're going to change up the ride height. They're going to change up how they have the steering in the car. They're going to change up, you know, some stabilizers. They're going to make the car more rigid. There's a lot of different components that they went into changing this car. So what I think is, I summarize it all up. I wish Subaru, obviously we all wish they would have continued with an STI. I'm not going to lie when I say that's disappointing. It just is. And there's nothing else to add there. I do wish they would have increased the RPM to like 6,500. It does run out of RPM really quickly, but it is the best tuned WRX I've ever driven, from STIs to WRXs. It is the most solid, stable feeling WRX that I've ever driven. I will say it is the stiffest WRX that I've ever driven, but it just feels very solid. It's a major step up, in my opinion, in terms of quality. Now, I think what Subaru did is they made a lot more driver-focused car. Maybe this car is meant for more off-roading with the ride height, with the plastic cladding, you know, but at the end of the day, I think we have a better tuned car. I think we have a better starting point. We have a less stress engine, an engine that Subaru knows that their audience is already going to modify these cars. So why not make a more solid platform for them to start off with? When you have more displacement, that gives you a lot more options for tuning, that gives you a lot more opportunities to be able to modify the car and hopefully still have reliability. And there's a lot of people that are pushing 400 wheel horsepower and 400 torque in this car. And so far the transmission is living up to it. Supposedly with the transmission, they've made changes to it, the manual gearbox. I really don't have a lot of specifics around that, so I didn't share that. I believe the turbo is still a Garrett turbo. I tried finding sizes of the new turbo versus the existing turbo. I wasn't able to find out bore and just different sizes of what that turbo is. But at the end of the day, when you look at the whole package, to say Subaru just let us down, this is number one, the formula Subaru has always done, if you watch the first of this video. Number two, we have a better driving car that I think is more solid, I think is going to be more reliable, more susceptible to tuning, more potential to get out of tuning with less dollars out of your pocket. And, you know, the subjective look piece of it, it is what it is, you know. You guys might think your wife is beautiful, I might think she's ugly, vice versa. Everybody has different tastes and nobody's ever going to have the same taste across the board. So as we're looking at the new WRX, I feel as a vlogger, somebody responsible for the community, to share all of the things that Subaru did change on this car. So if you're just writing it off to say, 3 horsepower increase, you, in my opinion, don't understand what Subaru has done over the years. And number two, you don't fully understand this platform and what it's capable of. If you guys like today's video, please like, comment, subscribe. Guys, there's so many things when manufacturers change from model year to model year. If I left something out, please let me know. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.